Hello and welcome back to SENDit.Brainsatwork. Steph and Claire back again, bringing real conversations about neurodiversity into workplace and everyday life.
So this episode focuses on Tourette's. Before getting started, it's important to say that neither Steph nor I have lived experience of Tourette's. The aim of this episode is not to speak for people, but to build understanding and share what has been learnt from research and community voices. So before going any further, it feels important to share how this episode has been put together. So a lot of time has been spent researching this topic, looking at trusted websites, reading books written by people with Tourette's and listening to voices and experience shared on social media.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's important to say that despite that research, there may still be gaps or things that have not been captured properly.
The intention of this episode is to build understanding, not to offend or misrepresent.
So if anything in this episode doesn't feel quite right or something has been misunderstood, listeners are obviously encouraged to reach out and share feedback with us.
Because learning about neurodiversity is ongoing and getting it right matters. So let's get stuck in.
Yeah, so Tourette's is often misunderstood, sometimes reduced to stereotypes in the media, but the reality is much broader and much more human. The conversation today is about understanding, not labelling.
So the episode will cover Tourette's, what Tourette's is, how it sits within neurodiversity, and how it links with conditions like ADHD, autism and OCD. And then we'll move into practical tools that we can look at for different suggestions for people.
Yeah, so Tourette Syndrome, or Tourette's, is a neurological condition. The main feature is its tics, because these are involuntary movements or sounds that a person cannot easily control.
So tics can be physical, like blinking, shoulder movements or head jerking, or vocal, like throat clearing, repeating sounds or words.
Yeah, and tics are not a choice. Suppressing them can be uncomfortable and exhausting. And obviously the more they're suppressed, the more you're thinking about them, the more they're going to come out.
Yeah, so swearing is oftenly misunderstood and may not affect all people with Tourette's.
Tourette's is considered part of the neurodiversity because it reflects a natural variation in how the brain works. So rather than something that is simply wrong or needs to be fixed, it can be helpful to pause here and explain what neurodiversity actually means.
Absolutely. So neurodiversity is the idea that people's brains naturally work in different ways. So those differences affect people, how people think, how they might move, how they might communicate, and also how they might experience the world.
Yeah, and importantly, those differences are not at all negative. They are part of the normal human variation.
So when you're thinking about Tourette's, one of the key reasons it sits within neurodiversity is that it's neurological.
Yeah, and that means that it's linked to how the brain develops and functions, particularly in areas that control movement, impulse and regulation.
So the tics seen in Tourette's are not a behaviour choice, they're part of how someone's brain is wired.
And that shift from seeing it as something to control to something to understand is what places Tourette's within the neurodiversity conversation. So Tourette's often exists alongside other forms of neurodivergence, particularly ADHD, autism and OCD.
Now, I thought this was really interesting actually, and it's really important because it helps explain why people's experiences can look really different from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously starting with ADHD, your attention and deficit hyperactive disorder, this is one of the most common conditions that sits alongside Tourette's.
So ADHD can show up in different as differences in attention, impulsivity, energy levels. So someone might find it harder to focus, sit still, or even manage those impulses.
Mm-hmm. And when ADHD and Tourette's sit together, it can sometimes mean that tics obviously feel more intense during moments of high energy or impulsivity. It could be harder to pause before acting or speaking, and there may be challenges with focus alongside managing tics.
So in a workplace or a learning environment, this might look like someone needing movement, struggling with long meetings, or finding it harder to regulate energy levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not about a lack of effort, it's about how the brain is processing that attention and control. And I think sometimes it can get turned off as well. So I don't have Tourette's, I haven't lived with it, I don't know about it, but as someone with ADHD, I do have my own little tics. I do break out into song, shout random words, but it's not Tourette syndrome.
So then if we look at autism and Tourette's, autism can also co-occur with Tourette's. So autism is often linked to differences in communication, social interactions and sensory processing. So when Tourette's and autism sit together, some experience might include increased sensitivity to sound and light, a need for routine and predictability, and different ways of communicating or processing social situations.
Yeah, and tics may also increase in overwhelming situations, particularly if there's sensory overload. So I did work with a little girl a long time ago, and she developed Tourette's as I worked with her, and she was lovely, and you could see the more she thought about it, the worse it got. Or as we got closer to dinner time, her Tourette's would get so much worse because she was getting excited about the fact she was going to get that break or have that movement. And everyone becomes overwhelmed in those specific environments.
So in practice then, and looking at that situation, it might be that somebody needs a quieter space, or it might be clearer communication, or it could be a more structured way of working.
Yeah, and again, it is about difference, not deficit, just a different way of experiencing the world. So there's some really, really strong links between Tourette's and OCD. So you've got your obsessive compulsive disorder, and this is where things can sometimes be really misunderstood.
That's because tics and compulsions can look really similar on the surface, but they come from a really different place.
Yeah, so a tic is usually a sudden physical or sensory urge. It builds up, and the movement or the sound kind of relives that feeling.
And then a compulsion, on the other hand, is usually driven by anxiety. So it's something someone feels they need to do to prevent something bad happening or reduce distress.
Yeah, exactly. So an example of it, I suppose, is a tic might be repeating a sound or a movement because of an internal urge, like a high-pitched whistle.
Yeah.
But then the compulsion might be repeating an action because it makes you feel safe or to reduce that worry. Again, I've worked with people who have OCD and they would have to shout my name 5 times every time they saw me because that was their compulsion to do it.
Yeah.
But it's adjusting to that, isn't it?
But then when you've got both of those things present, it can be really complex because the person may be managing both physical urges and anxious thoughts at the same time.
Yeah, so what this really highlights is that Tourette's is rarely a single experience.
Everyone's profile will be different depending on what sits alongside it.
Mm-hmm. And that is why understanding it, I suppose, matters so much, because what helps one person, I suppose, isn't going to help another person.
And it also feels really important to pause here and talk about strengths as well. So often conversations around Tourette's and neurodiversity more broadly focus on challenges.
Yeah.
That isn't the only part of the picture.
Yeah, but people with Tourette's, like all neurodivergent individuals, they bring their strengths, they have perspectives and ways of thinking that can really add value to a workplace.
So, many people with Tourette's develop strong resilience. Managing tics, navigating other people's reactions and adapting to environments that are not always understanding can take a lot of effort.
Mm-hmm. So that can build their perseverance, determination, and the ability to keep going through challenge, all of which are incredibly valuable in a work setting. There is often a higher level of self-awareness, so people may spend time understanding their triggers, their energy levels, and obviously what's going to help them regulate the best.
And that awareness can translate into stronger self-management skills, which can be a real asset in a busy or changing environment. So because environments are not always designed with them in mind, many people with Tourette's develop creative ways to navigate situations.
Yeah, and that can show up as a strong problem-solving skill, adaptability, and thinking differently about how things are done. So some people with Tourette's describe thinking in a creative or non-linear way.
And so this can bring originality, fresh ideas, new perspectives, especially in roles that benefit from innovation and creativity. Experiencing misunderstandings or stigma can also increase empathy.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important to be doing this. And obviously that can translate into a strong interpersonal awareness, obviously noticing how other people feel and creating that inclusive environment for others as well. It's a vital part of life, working life, everything. So for some individuals, particularly where ADHD also co-occurs, there can be high levels of energy and spontaneity.
So this can bring enthusiasm, momentum, and also different kinds of presence into teams. So the key point here is that these strengths don't sit separately from Tourette's. They're part of the whole person.
Yeah, and I think when work places focus only on what needs to be managed, they risk missing out on what somebody really brings to the business.
So inclusive workplaces are not just about removing barriers, they're about recognising and valuing differences.
So I suppose rather than asking, how do we manage Tourette's, the question really has to become, what is this person bringing? How do we create an environment where they can be seen?
Absolutely. So we wanted to then look at a real world example. So we've had, and it's been in the news, we've had the recent BAFTAs moment, which created conversation around Tourette's. And this is about us looking at it as a reflection and not as judgment.
Yes, because the guest had a vocal tic and it included very offensive language.
So the impact of this was real at the same time, but at the same time the tics were involuntary.
Yeah, and I think this reflects challenges workplaces may face, because this has been quite a big one. One I have looked at and we'll look at in more detail later is a teacher got Tourette's later in life as a teacher in a school, and then they had the discussion in the board of governors and everything around, is the swearing acceptable in school, what can we do to support, and obviously how that all works around as well. So I think that kind of links in with this one. It's the appropriate situation, isn't it?
So it's about workplaces looking at preparation, calm responses and supportive follow-up to help.
Yeah, because Tourette's can affect daily life in ways that are not visible. So yes, they have the tics that need to be supported, people need to be understanding about them. It's involuntary, it's not something that's malicious that comes out. So there are other effects in daily life as well that they need to be taken into account.
And it's really important to recognise managing reactions and environments that can take people's energy as well.
Oh God, I can imagine it must be exhausting.
We're going to look at our toolkits now. So support for individuals are always personal, and that's a real important thing. And what may work for one person might not work for another. Yeah. So with these toolkits, it's about people reflecting on what works for them. There are some areas that people might want to explore and help them understand themselves and ways to make themselves feel more supported.
Yeah, and obviously if there's things that we do miss and that do work for you, speak to us, tell us, let us know, and we can share that.
Yeah.
We did have a really good one the other day, didn't we, where somebody was in kind of a sensory overload with all of this, and they said, put something cold on your face, really cool yourself down. I thought that is one I've never actually considered before.
Yeah, that was really good.
So yes, I think the most important thing is to get that starting point, understand what the personal triggers are, or noticing when are the tics becoming more noticeable.
So this isn't always straightforward, but some common patterns people might notice are situations of stress or pressure, feeling tired or overwhelmed. It might be situations where there's high energy or excitement or changes in routine.
Yeah, and one way to build this awareness is simply noticing the patterns over time. So you've got to think about if it's going to be you reflecting at the end of the day or making a quick note on your phone, or asking yourself, what was going on just before my tic increased.
So the goal isn't to control or stop the tics, it's about understanding what helps and what makes things more challenging. So then if we look at regulation regulation is about managing energy, stress and sensory load. All these things can influence how tics show up.
Yeah, different people will find different strategies helpful, but examples might include taking breaks, like going for a walk, or making sure you do some stretching. Yoga is a great one to kind of support with this as well. Making sure that you step away from busy or overwhelming environments, because then that's building on it, isn't it? It's making you feel more nervous, more conscious about it, and then that's when they can really kind of bubble up and bubble over. Thinking about your calming routines, such as breathing, music or quiet time, and then obviously just making those sensory adjustments, like thinking about noise or bright lights, because we say a few times how much bright lights really do affect us. And then have some of those fidget toys to help release energy or tension.
So for some people, having a planned way to step out of a situation can be really important, especially if they've been holding the tics in for a short period.
Yeah, and it's worth saying that suppressing tics can be exhausting, so having time to rest and recover is just as important as being on.
So communicating needs can feel like a big step, especially if there's concerns about how other things and how others might respond.
There is no one right way to do this, but people find it helpful to just make sure they prepare a simple explanation of what Tourette's is for them. I've seen a lot of people lately wearing their sunflower lanyards with the cards on, and that's a great one for people to recognise from a distance as well, isn't it? Share what helps. For example, being able to step out of meetings, let employers know, this is what I'm struggling with, this is what would really help. And let others know what is not helpful, like drawing attention to your tics, making jokes about them, having subjects that are sensitive with them.
This might be done in different ways, so it might be a conversation with a manager or a colleague, it could be an email, it could be a short written profile explaining preferences and support needs.
Yeah, do what works best for you. Do you want to share it with the whole team? Do you want to have it, actually, this is my manager, can you spread it out? It's also okay to do this gradually. Not everything has to be shared all at once. Things develop over time. What you know now, you probably didn't know 5-10 years ago.
Absolutely. So support networks can make a really big difference, both emotionally and practically.
And these can take different forms. You know, a lot of people have friends, families, partners who they trust and offer reassurance. Some people have trusted colleagues at work. There's lots of online communities where people share experiences of Tourette's. A lot of our research came from speaking to people in these forums, kind of social media spaces where lived experience are shared openly between people. And then you've got some brilliant ones out there like your organisations and charities. So I think there's Tourette's Action and Tourette's Hero, and obviously there'll be your local support groups. To get into kind of these charities as well, or even additional support, it's worth mentioning it to your GP and healthcare services, occupational health, and I think there's a lot done at the minute with therapists who kind of coach familiarly with people with diversities.
So peer support is particularly powerful as well. So hearing from others with similar experiences can reduce isolation and help people feel understood.
And again, not everyone will want all of these, not everyone will need all of these. Support looks different for every single person.
And all of this comes back to one idea, understanding what works for the individual.
And obviously recognising that support is not about changing the person,
completely,
but about creating the right conditions for them to feel comfortable and obviously to be able to thrive.
So we've looked at toolkits for individuals. Let's take a look at toolkits for workplaces now. So workplaces can play a really important role in supporting people with Tourette's, and often it's not about big changes, it's about small, thoughtful actions done consistently.
So yes, it's building the awareness and the understanding of it. This is a real key point of it. So in practice, it might be making sure that managers and teams understand what Tourette's is. Do you want to share your own experiences? Do you want to share some knowledge around it? Challenge those common myths. For example, that tics are a choice, that people mean to do them, because they're absolutely not. And then obviously including Tourette's as part of the wider neurodiversity conversations. Don't just focus on your ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia. Tourette's is actually really common, so it needs to be out there.
And it doesn't have to be complicated either. It could be a short awareness session. It could be sharing simple guides or resources. It's about having open conversations with teams.
Yeah, because the aim is to reduce the surprise, isn't it? And the misunderstandings before it happens.
So then there's psychological safety, and it's such an important thing. So psychological safety is about people feeling able to be themselves without fear or judgment.
Yeah, and in action, this is something we really need to think about. It's not drawing attention to someone's tics in meetings. It's avoiding jokes and comments, even if they seem light-hearted, because actually they can have a real effect on a person's own self-worth. Responding calmly if something unexpected happens, and obviously modelling that respectful behaviour as a team.
So it's also about what is not said, so people not feeling watched, judged or singled out.
Yeah, adjustments do not need to be complicated, but they do need to be personalised. So speak up with how you feel. Yes, people may make jokes. Tell them that you feel uncomfortable about it.
Absolutely. So some examples of adjustments could be allowing someone to step out of a meeting if they need, offering flexible working hours to manage energy, providing quieter workspaces or areas with less sensory stimulation. So you could also look at adjusting how work is structured. So, for example, breaking tasks into smaller parts.
Yeah, you can do all of these, but I personally think that the most important action here is asking that question, what would help you do your best work?
There's also communication and clarity. So clear communication reduces stress, and stress can impact how tics show up.
It really can. And obviously, particular ways to do this is giving those clear expectations and instructions, and obviously avoiding last minute changes, because that's going to put a lot of pressure on people. Obviously understanding rather than assuming, so just check that they understand everything, and obviously have regular informal checkups. We use these regular pieces of advice in our toolkit because we've said it before, what's going to help neurodiversity is going to help neurotypical. I was just going to say
exactly the same thing, actually.
It helps everybody. It's not just making it stand out as that this person's different. It will help anybody in that environment.
Exactly. It's about making sure that things are predictable and reducing unnecessary pressure.
And obviously, as explored earlier, situations are going to arise that feel uncomfortable or unexpected.
What matters most is how people respond in the moment.
Yeah, so it's important, obviously, that we're staying calm and neutral and avoid drawing attention, reacting publicly, I suppose taking a moment before responding and following up with that privately and sensitively. I think that's one of the most key parts.
Absolutely important, and really importantly there, supporting everyone involved without placing blame. So if we look at leadership and culture, then leaders play a really big role in shaping culture.
Yeah, something we've talked about quite a lot recently, isn't it, is culture and shaping it and making it look right. So it might be having that open neurodiversity, role model inclusive behaviour. And I think most importantly, listening without judgment, because that's something we've covered quite a lot, because we've got to take concerns seriously and act upon them.
Culture is built through everyday actions and not just those policies, and I think quite often that's something that's forgotten. Just because it's written down doesn't automatically make it like culture, does it?
Yeah, absolutely, because we do have all these different policies in place in every workplace, but unless they're being followed, unless they're being looked at regularly, reviewed, it's a piece of paper that means absolutely nothing.
Absolutely.
So I think if there's one thing workplaces can take away from this, it is you don't need to have all the answers, but you do need to be open, honest, curious, and willing to learn.
Love that word, curious. Inclusion is not about getting it perfect. It's about responding with understanding and care.
Yeah, so this episode has been a starting point, I suppose.
We encourage everyone to explore lived experience voices.
Yeah, understanding obviously is going to lead to inclusion.
So, thank you very much for listening to Send It Brains at Work.
Yeah, and we will catch you again next week. Thank you. Podcast disclaimer. The views, thoughts and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the hosts. We are not experts, specialists or professionals, and nothing we discuss should be taken as advice. Our conversations are based around our own experiences, ideas and perspectives. They are intended for general discussion and entertainment only. If you need guidance, support or advice, whether professional, personal, medical, legal, financial or otherwise, please seek help from a qualified professional. By listening to this podcast, you understand and agree that the hosts are not responsible for any actions you choose to take based on what you hear.